Actually, it's mine.
Monday, February 27th, 2023.
Look up them.
And you give us a roll call?
Guile. Knapp.
Here.
Ritterbusch.
Here.
Keach.
Here.
Zobrist. Opperly.
Here.
Yordi. Deweese.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, next on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the last meeting, which was January 23rd.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second. In a second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed the same. Approved.
Okay. So tonight we have a number of public hearings on the agenda. And before we start or open our public hearing, I'm going to ask our counsel, Mr. Pat McGrath, to give us some instructions.
Thank you. Public hearings are being held tonight pursuant to published notice. Any person wishing to make a comment to the Plan Commission will be afforded an opportunity to do so and will give their testimony under oath or affirmation. Any person living within 250 feet of any specific property at issue in a case wishes to cross-examine a testifying witness may be afforded the opportunity at the discretion of our chair to cross-examine on matters germane to the issues before the Plan Commission. No member of the public should address a commission or a testifying witness unless and until recognized by our chair. At the conclusion of the public hearing, the Plan Commission will make a recommendation to the village board. The Plan Commission makes recommendations only. The village board is responsible for taking final action on these matters.
Thank you, sir. So the first item on the public hearing agenda tonight is petition number 23-03ZA. The subject property is located at 55 Ashland Court. A petition has been filed requesting a zoning change from I-2 to B3. Is there anybody here tonight from the petitioner who would like to make a presentation to us? Yes, sir. Come, please, need to be sworn in with the recorder. So please give us your name and your address.
My name is Matt Hoppock. I live at 87 Warwick Circle here in town.
Aaron Carlson at 230 East Fernwood.
Little background about ourselves. We started Meek Ventures. It's a family-oriented small business here in the community. We're looking to get involved in the community here. It's managed by Eric and myself, partners, and our wives. From that perspective, we've all had other careers, but again, looking to get involved in the community through different business ventures, etc. Our startup venture, looking to provide self-storage, drive-up self-storage at the 55 Ashland Court. Lot that is currently zoned I-2. So it's here on the end of the cul-de-sac at Ashland Court on the west side of Ashland. So we've been working on this for a while. Again, local team between ourselves and our wives, but have spoken with various different folks from the village planning for some understanding of the process, and that kind of led us to where we're at here today. Also working with our engineer, Steve Kerr, to understand our understanding is he's worked very much with the village to help us understand how this process would work. Specifically, the zoning amendment, we're looking to go from an I-2 to a B3 on this parcel. We do understand that the I-2 does allow for enclosed drive-up storage. However, for our particular use case, we'd also like to have an opportunity for face-to-face interactions with the community for the different customers that we would have. So to facilitate that, we'd like to have an office environment, which would be afforded in the B3 down zone. And also allows enclosed warehousing in the B3 as well. From an opportunities and benefit perspective, obviously this business would generate revenue and potential tax income for the village. We are a local team, so here in the community, we are all are also looking to, from a banking to build perspective, use local services and local resources. The B3 zoning, down zone specific that we're asking for, would allow us for that retail floor space as a value-added service to our core business. So again, that interaction with the Morton community, specifically face-to-face, either now or in the future. It also allows us to potentially sell value-added services as adjuncts to our core business. So locks, dunnage, boxes, those kind of things would be afforded in the B3 zoning, down zone. Those retail sales also certainly could potentially add value tax benefit to the county and village. Ultimately, again, we're looking for some office space now or in the future that would be afforded in the B3 as well to support that business. And our vision really is geared more towards that customer-centric interactions. So a name and a face and an opportunity to have those interactions, not just somewhere where somebody would store their materials. So from that perspective, we do understand that a special use could be an option, but from a B3 perspective, it would give us a little bit more opportunity to facilitate those discussions. Believe that the B3 would mesh with the surrounding lots in the area. The particular seller in this particular lot, Bill Keene, also owns some of the adjacent parcels, would have no issue with it. From a perspective of long-term development, trying to be cognizant also of the Cortland, or excuse me, the Cortland Street thoroughfare there. A B3, I think, would being on the back side of that offer good visibility that wouldn't necessarily be an industrial backyard, if you will, from that perspective. So would allow us to do what we would like to do and still have the opportunity to better that lot from that perspective. So went through a lot. Certainly there's probably a lot of questions. I'll bring Eric up as well if there's some answers that he may want to give.
Does anybody on the commission have questions for the petitioner?
My main question was why B3 rather than I2 since there was a special use, but you alluded to your reasons why. Are there any other reasons why?
Yeah, I think from a long-term perspective, just not having to come back repeatedly if we figure out how else that we could expand this business within that footprint, where the special use permit may need an amendment over and over and over again. And realistically, we see this service more as not an industrial service, but a business service, a business interaction with those consumers. So it just seems like that's more of the identity long-term of what we would do in that particular space, if that makes sense.
Yep, that's what I thought you'd say. So basically, anything that's allowable in a B3, I mean, you have the flexibility to do that.
Yes, and I think that's the long-term intention, is not to have to continue to come back now or in the future. Correct.
Right.
Thank you, Jim.
Yep. Yeah, and there's other B3 around there. I mean, it's a diversion from the original planned, zoning for that corridor, but there's B3 not too far away. So
the I2 probably allows different kinds of things that are made a lot different than what you are going to do. So if your neighbors around you develop that property into various I2 uses, you don't see yourself sort of being negative on them trying to develop their I2 property just because you're a B3?
No, I think being the corner lot, I think we can relatively insulate ourselves from that, from our perspective, if we're calling it like maybe a level of protection. From their perspective, if we look at the footprint of I think it's 4.5 acres, there's certainly some larger opportunities still there that they can utilize. Not sure if I answered your question or if maybe there's a follow-up.
Yeah, I think that answers my question. Thanks. Any other questions for them? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody from the public who would like to make a comment on this petition? Yes, sir. Please swear yourself in there.
I bought the property,
Could you please state your name and your address?
Dennis LaHood, in 1001 Hy-Vee Road, East Peoria. I bought the property a few years back, wanting to build a warehouse to store Caterpillar engines. Can you hear me? And
We just turned it up.
okay. I bought it to build a warehouse to store Caterpillar engines.
This piece of property?
Yeah, the 14 acres. I bought it from Home Transportation way back when. But I caught that Agent Orange cancer when I was in Vietnam in 1969. And I had to go through 2 years of chemo, so I had a clean house. And in the meantime, CAT shut down Mossville, so that plan was negated. So I sold the property to Bill Keene, who's been a friend for many years. And he has a truck line right next to it. And I think this storage facility would facilitate the sale of the 10 acres that he owns down below. It would really help with the development. We had plans to build a warehouse, but with CAT shutting down and moving things around and going to Texas with their headquarters, it negated my plans. But Bill, I had a clean house, and I sold the Better Banks building that we owned also. So I sold the rest of the shopping center land. So I cleaned house. Bill bought the industrial. There was an investment group that bought the bank building, and Joseph Company bought the empty ground in the shopping center. So that's why I had a clean house. I had like a 30% chance of living from what Mayo Clinic said. So Bill is all for this project. Had Caterpillar not shut down, we would have had a big warehouse there to store engines inside and out of the winter for the dealerships, and that's the story of the I-2. That's why I zoned it I-2 back way. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here that's speaking for or against this project? Seeing none, we'll close the public discussion on that and just discuss it amongst ourselves. Brad, you can chime in too on this. Is there anything particularly that we need to consider here?
As far as zoning, the only thing that really stands out is B3 does have lesser setbacks than I-2, so that does provide more square footage to do a little more of what they want to do there. I don't know if that's a concern on zoning part, since it's at the end of the cul-de-sac.
Okay. Any other comments, folks? If not, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve petition number 2303ZA as stated.
I'll second.
And we have a second.
Keach,
Yes.
Opperly,
Yes.
Ritterbusch,
Yes.
DeWeese,
Yes.
Knapp.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Okay, very good. The next item, we've got 4 in a row here, ordinances, suggestions for making amendments to various sections of the municipal code. And so the first one is an ordinance making amendments to section 10-4-3 of the Morton Municipal Code regarding landscape yard requirements. Brett, I think I'm just going to ask you to kind of summarize what the intent is of these various amendments.
Yes, and if Attorney McGrath can, if you can step in whenever you feel appropriate, I'd appreciate that. But this amendment here, this was in our code before Muni code. I do believe at some point when we switched from our old code system to Muni code, the 25-foot landscape front yard somehow was lost. I'm not quite sure how that happened, but we did find this at one point. So really, what this does is it requires all lots in all zoning districts except for the RS to have a 25-foot landscape front yard. That's not changing. That's always been, as far as I know. It's just that it was not in the code. Did I summarize that properly?
It was in the code for a number of years, and then through a prior code update, it dropped out inadvertently, and so Brad discovered the error and we're correcting it.
Okay.
Good catch, Brad.
Thank you.
Any discussion amongst the board?
Does this one also talk about, is it adding in the minimum square footage on a ground floor?
That's a good question. No, that's also something in the Muni code. That's always been in the code. That's not changing. I think it just gets highlighted in some kind of a clerical way.
I can't figure out why it shows up as new text.
Okay.
Anytime I make an ordinance change in that section, that still shows up as proposed new text, but it's approved text, and I cannot figure out in their system how to change how that prints.
Okay.
So it's misleading.
So all those sections that were all green are existing?
There are a couple in this specific ordinance. Everything that was not related to landscape front yards are
Right.
existing sections.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Again, because I thought these are really familiar. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have a motion on this one?
I make a motion that we approve this.
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah, I was just gonna offer it as part of
I
our
think we
public
need to see if there's anybody in the public who wants to talk to address this issue. Anybody interested in addressing this? If not, we'll close the discussion and I'll ask for a motion.
You ready for the motion?
Yes.
I'll make a motion that
Okay.
we approve this ordinance change.
Okay.
Second.
Deweese,
Yes.
Ritterbusch,
Yes.
Opperly,
Yes.
Knapp,
Yes.
Keach.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Okay, item B on the agenda, an ordinance making amendments to Chapter 3 of the Title 10 of the Morton Municipal Code regarding accessory uses and buildings in the R3 and R4 zoning districts.
So this also is a similar petition. This just addresses accessory uses and buildings in R3 and R4. It's the same verbiage as we have in R1 and R2, and we've had that in the past, except the verbiage was just not in the code.
So building on that, you adopted an ordinance moving accessory code. We've been overall stylistically putting district-specific regulations in each district section instead of in 10.4.3. We had moved accessory building regs into RS, R1, and R2. We did not at that time move it in R3 and R4. This would put those same provisions into R3 and
So
R4.
are these exactly the same provisions?
Yes.
And it's shown on page 5 and 6, right? Is that what we're looking
Yes, sir.
at?
Yep,
And there's some other little green areas that are formatting issues.
correct.
Okay,
That are not new language.
okay.
Pat, that applies to the play structure building permit requirement as well?
Yeah, the regulation specific to play structures is included in the
Okay.
accessory building regs. Yep.
Okay, so we did cover that a few meetings ago. And so this is very similar. Any discussion? Anybody from the public who would like to comment on this ordinance change? Seeing none, we'll close the discussion and call for a motion.
I'll move to approve as written.
I'll second.
We have a first and a second.
Ritterbusch,
Yes.
Yes.
Deweese,
Yes.
Opperly,
Yes.
Knapp.
Yes.
Motion approved.
And item C, an ordinance making amendments to Chapter 5 of Title 10 of the Morton Municipal Code regarding landscape screening of accessory buildings.
So this ordinance, this ordinance does not actually change anything, but what it does is it changes the verbiage. So in our code, if you had an accessory structure, a building, for example, in the rear yard, and it's visible, what I would like to call it in the shadow, outside the shadow of the house, then landscape screening is required. I always felt like the verbiage for anybody to read that really does not lead you to that explanation. So I asked Pat if he could look into the verbiage, and we try to make this to where it's a little more clear for people to understand. I think it does that, where it says, any sides of accessory building which is visible from public or private street, instead of the abutting a street. It's a simple change in verbiage, but I think it does help. It just helps clarify it for people. I have these questions a lot when people want to put a storage building and such, and they're like, well, I'm not abutting a street. I don't understand what you mean by that. And it's a legitimate question, so I think this verbiage does make it a little more clear. If it's visible from public or private street, that's a little more clear, I believe, for people to understand.
So what if somebody, what if you can see the accessory building, you're just a little bit beyond the edge of the house or other building, and you can see the accessory building, but it's not really, that the accessory building is not abutting a street?
Correct. A good question. I always tell people, just take your side of your house and draw an imaginary line straight back to the rear property line, and that's your shadow. If it falls outside of that line, then now it's visible to the street.
Okay. Because this reads to me like it would still be visible if you're not standing, you know, if you're not standing perfectly in pure elevation with the building.
Sure.
I mean, if you could actually see it from the street, it's visible, right?
Sure.
I mean, is there a concern there, or do you feel like
I mean, that's a good question. Does anybody from the commission, you know, yeah, that would be very helpful for me if you could come up with something.
As drafter of this, when Brad explains how he applies it, we understand it, but to take that into code level wording with the degree of specificity that is enforceable and readily easy to understand is a different proposition. I would say in that instance, part of, as in many ordinances, part of the kind of what's inherent in the system is discretion in the enforcement, much like the speed limit 65 and we don't write it 66 or 70, I guess, and don't write it 71. You know, I don't think Brad has interpreted the code language in the same way and would continue to do it in the same way. But certainly if there's ideas for how to rewrite this in a different way that would be consistent with Brad's interpretation or application of current code language, you know, we can take that feedback and take it back to the drafting table.
Well, I would hope that Brad is here for many years to come, but
Well,
there may be a successor
Well,
to Brad at
let's not
some
get too
point in
far.
time.
I mean,
would he
so-
interpret it the same way, because it's
Yes.
visible. You know why I'm saying this? Because
Yes.
my own experience with the church we designed in Peoria, and they have a screening rule for mechanical systems. And we placed a mechanical unit in the backyard, back behind the building, the way you're describing, and the code enforcement official could see the unit from a mile up the street. He could see it, you know, with his binoculars, and we
sure.
we had to put a screen up. So I think that was his interpretation, you know what I mean, as
Right.
opposed to like something that was written.
And I see it a little, to me, I see that as a little more gray. I mean, now we're talking about at what angle are we standing.
Right.
To me, my interpretation is really based off of the interpretation of the gentleman that did this role before me, and this is how he interpreted it. It made sense to me. I understood that, and I think it makes sense to use that line, because now we have more of a black and white standard. We don't have, well, if Brad stands a little to the right, then he can see it, or if he, and I get that. If I stand a little to the right, I probably am going to see it, but maybe if Bill stands to the right a little bit, maybe he doesn't see it. So I don't see that as consistent enforcement. I think we need to go with something a little more consistent that we can all say, oh yes, that's very clear. We can all of us could agree on that.
I guess I had a question. What about a corner lot where you have the side street? That's going to be visible from that side street, so that requires screening.
Yes, good question, yes.
So, okay, if the first house off of the side street doesn't have anything there, the second house would have an accessory building. It would have to have screening then, because it would be visible, but it's the second house in from the side street.
I interpret that as no, because we have a lot that is there that someday somebody could do something with.
Okay, so that would be your interpretation then.
Right.
Because I can find some around town where there's the house on the corner does not have an accessory building, but the second one in does. And if you look down that back lot line, you would see that accessory building at the second lot, or it could be even the third lot in. But you're saying, once you jump lot lines, this doesn't apply.
Yes, I think we have to look at it as this lot, regardless of what's going on around it. I don't think what goes on around it should fall into play here at all.
Well, yeah, that is an interpretation, because it's not really written that way. And in Jeff's example, I'm sure that code official was looking across lots to see.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and I can think of very specific examples. Yeah. So it's open to interpretation for sure. And I agree with Jeff's comment that, sure, that's great as long as you're the code official, But if that changes, then,
Is this a code that you're having trouble enforcing as it's written now?
I'm not saying it's hard to enforce, but I get questioned a lot on it because people don't understand it, and they don't. Because when somebody comes in to put in a storage building, let's say, and I explain to them that they need landscape screening, you are asking something of that person. It's a burden, it's a cost. So they're always going to question that, and then when they question that, they say, well, show me this. Well, when I show it to them, I think it leaves a very gray area for interpretation. So I really want to take that out of it to where that person is saying, well, that's what you think, but I don't think that. So I want to be a little more black and white and a little more clear, which I think this does accomplish. Now, I'm not saying it, maybe there's something that could be more clear.
Yeah, I mean, if the way you described it, it almost sounded like you could begin to say something like, if it falls within the projected, lines of the building perpendicular to the front street, blah blah blah. I'm not a lawyer, but or a code official writing that, but maybe there is some way to say, the projected plane of the house. Are you following me? Does that get too complicated?
Well, I think this wording allows the village to require screening on just about any situation, even if the building is behind the shadow of the house.
Right.
If you can, with the wording of this, the village could require them to screen it, even though it meets what you're describing as what your interpretation has been in the past, where if it falls inside of the shadow of the house, you can still see it from just a little bit down the side, and you could require them, based on this wording, you could require them to landscape screen it, or whatever the screening would be.
I would agree.
I would agree with that. I feel like the code should be as clear to where if any one of us were to be thrown in this position, that
Yeah.
you would interpret things to the same level as what I'm interpreting. So if that leaves that even a little too gray yet, I mean, to me, the more clear it is, I'm more than
I'd like
happy
to see
to.
it, I'd like to see us take another stab at it myself.
Sure.
Does anybody else agree with me on that?
Yeah, I mean, I almost prefer the abutting in there versus the visible. It takes away your scenario of being able to look across the lot, right, if you leave abutting in there. So, I don't know that this is gonna eliminate the questions that you've been giving, so I,
Sure.
Some ordinances have a little graphic. And does ours even have that, maybe? A little
Well, we do
representation
like
of-
some illustrations. I think that's a good idea. We do have illustrations that just show front yard, side yard, rear yard, what those are, but, so
might-
Pat, would an illustration be something appropriate for this to put in the ordinance, or could we just
think we
refer
still-
to?
I think we still have to word it.
We'd have,
You know, in terms of what the standard is, you could write an illustration for,
You could define the
illustration
shadow
purposes.
of the house and then show an arrow showing what's defined as the shadow, house.
Pat, do you feel that would be an appropriate to,
if someone has some ideas for specifics, get them to me and I'll try to factor that in. This wording was deliberate in the fact that I think that is a much easier concept to say than it is to reflect in writing that's applicable to every house within town.
so we should have some verbiage, and if an illustration accompanies that?
Yeah. So
I'm-
I can take another pass at it. It was ultimately my conclusion as a drafter that there isn't a very good way to do,
Yeah.
the word abutting isn't correct because it's not touching, and I think abutting in a literal sense would mean
Yeah.
touching.
I think it's a very difficult
So
thing, for sure.
I think that doesn't lend to clarity, but I think it's a more challenging proposition to write than you realize until you sit down and try to do it. So
Well,
I'd be glad to take another pass at it, and if anybody has specific wording they like or want to send to me to consider, I'd be glad to factor that in.
And I most certainly can include an illustration, or a couple illustrations, one for interior lot, one for a corner lot, and bring that back with the new verbiage. And if,
I think that most people that are going to have a hard time, citizens, understanding what you're trying to convey, which I agree with, that illustration is going to go a long way to help you pass that along to them.
Sure.
Well,
I can
really
do-
what it is, if the building is within the projected area of the house to the lot line, then it doesn't need screening. But if it's outside of
Outside
that
of it,
projected area of the house to the lot line, then you need screening.
Correct. Yep.
unless the corner lot.
In the corner lot, obviously, there's no projection of the house to that. You're gonna have to screen the corner lot
Yes,
anyway, because the house doesn't project across that.
because that's a front yard. The front yard exists on that side.
So I think you can play around with some words like projected or something like that, might help define this better. And then with a little illustration, would certainly make it very clear.
So how do we handle this? Do we table this one, or what's the best way to do this?
If you table it, it saves us from having to republish a new notice, so save a little cost for the village. Since what I'm going to bring you back next is derivative of this,
Yeah, that's fine.
you can just bring another, continue it
Okay.
tonight.
Okay.
We have to make a motion to
Well,
table.
I'll make a
Yeah.
motion that we table this item until the revised wording is available.
I'll second.
Ritterbusch,
Yes,
Deweese,
Yes.
Keach,
Yes.
Hepp,
Yes.
Opperly.
Yes.
Okay, motion's tabled.
Okay, and then item D, an ordinance making amendments to Chapter 6 of Title 10 of the Morton Municipal Code regarding metal shops and welding shops in the B3 zoning district. Looks like we're just removing those from B3?
Yes, I was, it was requested of me by trustee Leach to go through the B3 and identify anything that was industrial or manufacturing that didn't seem to fit in B3. I came up with sheet metal shop and welding shop. Trustee Leach agreed with that. So those two would fall under industrial, under the general use in industrial, both of those items. And as far as I know, we do not currently have a sheet metal shop or welding shop in B3, but I don't know that 100% as fact. I'm unaware of it if it exists.
I was going to ask that question. Is there anybody from the public who would like to make a comment about this item on the agenda? If not, we'll close that part of the meeting. Any discussion?
I think it makes sense moving forward for any new development.
Okay. If no one else has a comment or a question, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion, we approve amendments to Chapter 6 of Title 10.
Second.
We have a first and second.
Opperly,
Yes.
Deweese,
Yes.
Keach,
Yes.
Net,
Yes.
Ritterbusch.
Yes,
Motion is approved.
And so the public hearing ends at this point. Under other business, item A is an easement vacation plat for PIN number 06-06-16-201-006 and 06-06-16-201-007.
You could have said it. 007. I know you wanted to say it.
I could have said 007. Brad, are we just approving this?
Yeah, both of the, yes, I can, so both of these, the next two items are more of a formality, but I can explain them. The easement vacation plat of A is on Harding Road when there was two lots that were combined. Those lots had utility easements on the lot lines, 6 feet on each side. So when they combined the lots, they were required to vacate the utility easements so that it could be one lot and so that you could never put utilities through there. So to get these recorded, they need to go through the Plan Commission and the Village Board. So if we want to take these one at a time, if that's how we need to do it.
Could theoretically approve together if no one objected to doing it together, but either works.
So I can explain the other one.
Yeah, go ahead.
The other one is called Plat of Vacation. They're actually both the same, just worded a little different. So this is where Precision Planting is building their new facility, Erie and Agriculture Drive. The same scenario on the north side of this lot is where the new road will go in. So they are just vacating the utilities that existed when those two lot lines went through there.
So if we approve these both at the same time, the village board could choose to pick one or the other if they wanted to. That it doesn't mean that they have to look at it as a lump.
In either instance, you're making recommendations, so
Yeah.
whether you act on them together or at once,
Let's have a motion for both of them. After discussion, of course, if there's any. Anybody feel moved?
I move that we make a motion that we approve these two items together.
Okay.
Second.
Knapp,
Yes.
Deweese,
Yes.
Keach,
Yes.
Hopperly,
Yes.
Ritterbusch.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Now we have, see, Brad, we've got a couple line items under your name there.
Yeah, so that's just information only. It's just to let you know as a planning commission and the public know that the zoning map, the official map of the Village of Morton, and the land use map have all been updated from all the changes from last year, the items that went through the planning commission, zoning changes, special uses and such. So those maps are now updated. They're on the village website.
Okay.
If you care to
Yes, for
look.
clarity, that's the 2022 zoning map, the 2022 Village of Morton official map, and the 2022 land use map. Those are
Yes.
all updated and on the website.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion and we adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.